So hello and welcome to everybody. I'm Avi Singh, and I'd like to say that I was maybe an above average Excel user, but I became extraordinary when I discovered Power BI. But we're not here to talk about me, we're here to talk Power BI, and it's all about you. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand, and I'm going to unmute you, and we're just going to chat. So any question you have around Power BI, maybe you're just getting started, and like, oh gosh, how do I figure this out? Maybe you're looking to deploy this in your organization. You're like, oh gosh, I want to make sure I start off on the right path. Or you're stuck somewhere in the weeds with a DAX formula or M function or something. Any of that, just raise your hand. There should be a button on your interface to do that. Is there? Well, I know Doug found it earlier, so I know it's there. So go ahead, raise your hand. Okay, perfect. All right, there you go. All right, Doug, welcome to the call. First of all, just tell me a little bit about yourself, where are you joining from, and what's on your mind. Hello? Can you hear me? Doug, you're live. I saw your hand raised. I assumed you had a question.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So yeah, first off, thank you for doing this, Avi. A question I have is really the difference between I get Power BI Desktop with Power Query and then Power BI on the web. So what's the difference? Because Power BI, just the web version of it, you can't use Power Query. Is that a correct statement? So how do you work the two together? Because data cleansing is so important, but it seems like I need that interface from Power BI Desktop as an intermediate step. Is that a correct way to frame this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And by the way, I have been accused in the past of not repeating the question. So I have made this vow that, hey, if I don't repeat a question, I'm going to put some money in the class jar. I'm not sure what we're going to do with that money. We'll find something good. Maybe buy t-shirts for the person I didn't repeat the question. So Doug, if I understand your question, understand the difference between, and I'll correct my typo later, Power BI Desktop and PowerBI.com, especially around the query editor or engine.
Correct.
Okay. Now, I love that question, and I have to say that I think things are getting better, but there has been a lot of confusion around the terminology used and so forth. So let me see if I can pull up the right visual here. So the way I see and understand this ecosystem, this is what Microsoft at least wants you to do. So you have Excel, and that has its add-ins, used to be called Power Pivot, Power Query, but those names are really going away. If you see the new Excel 2016, it doesn't really use those terms. You just see data model, query, Power Query has this weird name, get data and transform, but those elements are there, whatever you call it, right? So that's the Excel side, and on the Power BI Desktop, everything has always been integrated together. It's just Power BI Desktop, and within that, you have the query editor, you have the data model, relationships, and of course, reports and dashboards. But really, the way Microsoft sees it is that those are authoring tools, and they want the end goal that doesn't matter which tool you choose to author, that you publish it somewhere. As far as they're concerned, the prime target is PowerBI.com. So let's see if I have Power BI Desktop open. Let me just do this. So publish is the main step, and that's why you would notice that in the Power BI Desktop, that button is bang in the middle whenever it comes up. Oh, there we go. Right, so publish is right there because that's what you expect you to do. They don't expect you to really share a Power BI file or Excel file. Now, there are other options to publishing besides PowerBI.com. There's SSAS. There's going to be an on-prem SQL Server Reporting Services option. We can deploy reports, a lot of that. So the idea is that you author your report here and you have the full, full-fledged interface, right? I mean, that is meant for authors. I mean, it's got so much going on here. I know you can author reports on there, but really if you look under the covers, there's the query editor, and plus, this is where you define all your measures and all that stuff. So it's very rich. So you define it here, and once you deploy it to a server, let's say, could be in the cloud, could be PowerBI.com, could be on-prem, then that server is where the refresh happens. And of course, the PowerBI.com, you cannot create queries, but you can ask that, hey, all the queries that I had in my file, go ahead and refresh those. So maybe let's see if I can launch PowerBI.com. So is that making sense? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That is very helpful because I was thinking that the tools were comparable with the exception of Power Query. But really, I see what you're saying. It's a terminology thing I think Microsoft needs to clear up, that there's like you just said, an authoring process and a published area where
Yeah.
I don't think that they make that clear. And that's what really was getting me wrapped around in a circle.
Yeah. All right, awesome. And I'll throw another analogy, which is think about video, and especially if you talk to the new generation, it's possible, gosh, I don't know, I'll have to ask my son. If you ask them about, do you know what an MP4 is? They may not know because they have never experienced video this way. So think about this. We've been living in the 20th century. We've been living the last century. So we've been living in XLSX file. And now we don't want to make the PBIX the new XLSX. That's not what it's about. So think about how we share video now. There are some authors, very few authors, compared to the number of people that consume. I don't know, for every person that generates MP4, there might be like 1,000 or thousands of people who just see it. And how do they see it? They see it via the cloud platform. Well, YouTube mostly, right? YouTube, Facebook, something like that. So that's, I think, the world we're moving into, where this XLSX and PBIX, that's kind of for the geeks, and I say that proudly. I consider myself one. So that's the equivalent of MP4 files, but then we're going to publish it, and from what happens after that is beautiful, right? So just how easy it has become to consume videos by YouTube, Facebook. Now it's on the web. You can consume it on any device you want, iPhone, Android tablet, whatever, and you can use a visualization tool of your choice. Now, this is something which people miss as well. Once you publish it on PowerBI.com, you can create Power BI dashboards and reports, but you can also connect Excel to it. You can also connect SSRS, or heck, if you tried hard enough, you could connect even non-Microsoft tool, Tableau if you will, to that. So that becomes a single source of truth that feeds all your reporting. All right, so that's the vision. Man, yeah, hopefully it helps.
It does. Alvi, one quick follow-up question if I could.
Sure.
My other roadblock is that my company does not want to put the confidential corporate data on the web, so I'm losing that functionality. Is there a way, or will there soon be a way, to take that and perhaps render it in a simple way behind the firewall, or something that I don't have to go out on the public web?
On the cloud? Okay, great. Yeah, good question. Comes up all the time. And they are paving a path for it. Let's see, 2016 CTP. I can find it. So this the new version of SQL Server is being built for that. So my understanding is it's in what's called Community Technology Preview. So it's still in preview. CTP Power BI. But yeah, so this is going to be an on-prem server. And yeah, the data is not going to leave your premises. So this is kind of the ultimate solution. Yeah, there we go. So what I'm going to do is, let's see if you asked the question. Can you put a question in the text box? There should be something, and I'll send you the URL. That way you don't have to hunt around. So this way, this is going to let you publish your reports to an on-prem server. Although I'll also say, man, I'm not a security expert, but I really like to at least challenge people on that notion. So the few things that I point out is that you don't realize you're already in the cloud. And think about a lot of companies have embraced Salesforce. A lot of people don't even know the on-prem solution that was there before Salesforce. I think Siebel was a big player. Right, so Salesforce is there. Plus, for a lot of companies, the email, which is so sensitive, right? Guys, there are a lot of skeletons buried in their emails. Email is in the cloud. A lot of companies are not running Exchange on premises. They have moved on to Exchange Online. So I get the aversion, but I don't quite buy it. So, and I know it's kind of hard to have that discussion. So I'll send this to everybody. Great. So SSRS is a surefire way. That way it never leaves the premises. There are other hybrid options as well. Another one is what you can do. Let's see if I can do that there. Is you can host the data in here in an on-prem SSAS server, and then it goes through Power BI, and you have Power BI reports and dashboards and all that stuff, but the data does not reside in the cloud. You don't upload anything. I love that way, but of course, when I pitch that to skeptics, they say, oh, but Power BI caches my data, and I have no argument to counter that. It does cache your data, so in a way, it lives in a very transient form. So this is the approach that I like doing. So it's a kind of a hybrid. So your data is on-prem, but it's rendered through PowerBI.com. So you have all the power and functionality of PowerBI.com. I mean, there's so much there. So we talked about authoring tools, but there are things which a service can do which an authoring tool cannot. So on PowerBI.com, there's the natural language Q&A, right? I mean, you can just ask a question about something, just type something in. I don't know if it'll work for me. Sales by month. Oh boy, it did. Great. Yeah, it just blows my mind. And there are tons of other things in here which on-prem can't do. So a few options are that SSAS on-prem, but PowerBI.com, you use that for the reporting, or bring it completely on-prem using the SSRS preview edition. All right, well, thanks. Those were good questions. Let's see, what else do I have? So yeah, thanks, Doug. Thanks for those questions. All right, Scott, tell us about yourself. Where are you calling from, and what's on your mind?
Avi, hi. I'm from Atlanta, and I was on the call last week. I shared a dashboard with you.
Okay, when you said Atlanta, I was like, okay, all right, it's not Scott. All right, well, welcome back.
Thanks. I was just curious, in last week's discussion, we had talked about how to distribute reports from Power BI, and one of those scenarios was external users, and I shared a global temperature anomaly dashboard with you.
Yeah. Yep.
Just curious about how if that worked as we expected it would.
I think it did. Yeah, let me bring up that email. So, Scott. So yeah, this is the email that I got. You guys can see my screen. Yeah, you can. Okay. So can you see that, Scott?
Yep.
All right. So I think this was your comment you typed in, and it just says, yeah, open this. And if I click on that, if I do not have a login, it'll ask me to sign up. And I think the condition is that if you shared it with me at obviously.com, I have to have an account with that email address. Kind of makes sense. I mean, if I forward it to somebody and they logged in, I think that's how it works. Maybe we can test it out. But yeah, so I just click it, and here it is, fully interactive. Boy, so that's really cool. Hey, I know we were talking about show and tell. So why don't you just walk us through what is this about? What is this show? Just curious.
Yeah, so I just wanted to find a data set, and I went out to a couple of websites, NASA being one of them, to pull the history of temperature anomaly, and the temperature anomaly is compared to a base period. So there are two different sources here comparing the change in temperature over time.
Yeah.
Had a kind of a little sidebar interest of all the discussion about global warming going on, and it doesn't seem like a big change, but apparently half a degree change is pretty big. It's pretty significant. In the chart on the left-hand side of these dashboards, I added in used the analytics tool to do a 10-year forecast, and it also has a 10-year look back. So I was interested in seeing, well, how would the forecast have done compared to actual if we'd forecasted it back, and see those two.
Very cool.
It's interesting to kind of see how it changes over time with looking at the different time periods as to how that starts to trend up. We had talked also about Azure machine learning, and I have that in Excel, and I tried to use that, but it requires putting the information out on a web service, which seemed to take a little bit more knowledge to be able to do before you could process using the Azure functionality. So I was curious about this forecasting tool. Does that have any relationship to Azure? And then maybe as a sidebar or related topic, how is Cortana being used in Power BI?
Gosh, yeah. So I'll say I'm on thin ice there. I haven't used those myself. What I'll say is I think Azure ML is certainly going to be a superset of whatever you find kind of inbuilt into Power BI. I mean, this would be, I would say kids' toys compared to what all is available in Azure ML. But on the kind of under the covers, I'm assuming this is using one of the other, I don't know, methods of forecasting. I'm sure there are a few, and I'm sure they have like cool names. And I don't know which one. So you might be able to search for that. Say, hey, what is the forecasting method used by Power BI? In Azure ML, you would have your pick. I know I've seen that interface. So you just say, hey, I want to use this method to do forecasting, or I want to use that method. So I think that's the best answer I can give you. But yeah, hey, this is great. So just one thing I wanted to point out about sharing was that when you share externally, at least that's how it works right now, every time I need to check it, I need to open it via the email. If I were to go into just log into PowerBI.com, I would not see what you had shared with me. This is different than if people were to share internally. So if I'm working at Microsoft.com or whatever, and I share with anybody else, as soon as I share it with them, they see it in their list right here. They don't have to go anywhere. They can just come back to PowerBI.com and they'll see it. Boom. So that's the one difference right now, at least. They keep changing things all the time. All right, so yeah, hey, good work here. Keep going. I mean, Azure ML and all that stuff. Yeah, by all means, go ahead, give that a try, see how that works, and maybe we'll have you back to show us more, show us how that worked.
All right, thanks.
All right, take care. All right, we're gonna go to our next scholar, and I have. Well, let's see if I get the name right. Rigo, you can correct me. Let's see if I can unmute you. So Rigo, it's saying something on an audio pin. Are you calling in? You might have to punch in a pin in there. So okay, so I'm going to come back to you. Audio pin sent. Okay, let's see if we have any other questions. Pamela, hey Pamela, welcome back.
Hey, hello. I'm doing good, and I'm glad Scott shared his dashboard. It's beautiful. It's a great one. And what I really wanted to see was, since he's sharing it to you, an external customer, can you get into his data set? What can you see? Could you? Yeah. That's my biggest concern.
Well, so yeah, so Scott left a door open. A big barn door, actually, which is ask a question about your data. And this gives me everything. Now you can turn this off, right? So, but if you leave that open, and obviously it's not easy, but it's possible that they can pull in some data. Oh boy, yeah, look at that. It just dumps out a table here.
Okay.
And there's no way to export it, but I can screenshot it or something like that. And of course, by decade or something. I don't know. Right.
Okay.
So that's the first one. So I think I will say the short answer is that it's you can reasonably secure your data and ensure that they only see. I can't seem to go back. They only see what you want them to see, but you have to be slightly careful. The Q&A is one thing you need to turn off, and let's see if I can quickly figure out where to do it. Settings, datasets, dataset. Ah, there we go. Q&A. Huh, that's not it. Okay, I'm not gonna. Or maybe dashboard. Ah, perfect, great. So yeah, so you go to the dashboard, so Scott can just go there and uncheck this box, and boom, there's no Q&A box, and that really limits it. Now, of course, there are other functionality here. Let's see, which let you kind of export the data. So one thing that I didn't realize at the beginning was, so what I was doing was I was sharing a dashboard with the user. And I didn't want them to get into the underlying report because the underlying report was kind of richer and I had more stuff in it. But as far as I know, there's no way to solve for that. Well, actually, there might be a really hokey way. But by default, let's just say that if you give them access to the dashboard, which is the unit of sharing in Power BI, so you shared the dashboard, they'll always have access to the underlying report. Now, there's some hokey ways which you can avoid that. And once you're in the report, there are going to be options to export data from there. So what they see, they will be able to export, the same numbers to CSV. You can't quite avoid that, but you can totally control exactly what they see.
Okay.
What do you think? Do you think I'm missing something? Is there another concern?
No, I was just really worried. I mean, if you send it out to an external, person, could they dump your whole entire data set? And
yeah, no, there's no way to do that.
Okay.
Even with here, they can't dump it out. And if you turn off Q&A, it's very limited.
Is it different within your own company, though? I mean, do they have, if I share it with someone within my own company, can they get to it any easier or?
Well, that's a good question. So do you want them to get to it easier? Sometimes I know you do.
Well, I mean, if you were, I think if you knew what you were doing, you probably could get into underlying data. You may not want to show them like bonuses or that type of thing.
Yeah, good question. Data. What about sharing internally? So for internally, the only big difference is going to be, gosh, let's see if I can. Let's see if we sign in as somebody else within the organization.
And I guess the same thing if I share like a content pack with somebody, then they do have the entire.
Yeah, that's a good question. Gosh, I can't make it work right now. But yeah, so typically if you share a dashboard, then the convenience is if you're sharing it internally that they don't have to go find your email. They can just come to Power BI, powerbi.com, and they'll see it. And it shows up with a small icon here, kind of a shared icon, which tells them that, hey, this is not yours, this is somebody else. But yeah, they're limited to the same limits that the external user would be, that as long as you turn off Q&A, they can't really access anything. I mean, they can kind of export data and this, that, but not really get to the underlying data set.
Okay.
Now, if you do want to give them additional access, and there are a lot of scenarios where internally you do, content pack is one way. So I'll quickly show people here. You can create content pack, and you can package things together. And notice what happens when I check any of the dashboard. It selects the underlying report and the data set as well. So really that gives them access to the data set. And once you have access to the data set, then actually it's you can't quite dump it in the sense. I mean, the closest you can get is actually you can dump it. You can say analyze in Excel and then write a DAX query which just dumps the whole table. It's not as straightforward if that was intent. So that gives them access to the data set and they can connect to it via Excel and dump it out.
But I have your formulas too. Do I have your formulas if you share it with me?
No, you do not have the definition of the formulas. formula. The only way to get
Okay.
that is to get your PBIX file.
Okay. Okay.
All right, pretty
Okay.
cool.
Good. Okay. Thank
And of
you.
course, yes, good question. Of course, sometimes I want to share the formula. So I've done this for large projects where I have like, I don't know, 100 plus users using the PBIX file. And there, this was within Microsoft. A lot of people are really savvy. I mean, they understand all of these structures and formulas, and yeah, and they just want to dive under the covers. So what I would do is I would kind of export all the formulas and then import them back into the model. That way anybody who's accessing the model has access to the formulas as well, and that kind of became my poor version of documentation. Hey, so good set of questions, Pamela.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so let's see. Rigo, looks like I can unmute you now. Hey, Rigo, first of all, gosh, am I saying your name right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. So tell us about yourself. Where are you calling from, and what's on your mind?
Hey, I'm a team manager for a landscaping company. We're in Phoenix, Arizona, and we are starting our business intelligence journey a couple of months ago. We're making some slow progress, and so the question I have for you is, this is kind of a new area for us, trying to take data from our accounting database and starting to look at that and see what it's telling us and create pretty dashboards and so currently the way, since we're figuring things out as we go, and currently the way we're kind of sharing, we're not using Power BI online at all. We're just using the Power BI Desktop to author the report, but we're also using that now also to share the reports. And so essentially, and so that's kind of, we're still in this area of like, okay, can we work some of the dashboards into our workflows? And so that's really what we're doing. We hit a little hiccup last week with, the report it wants to run credentials for each new user, and I think we figured that out. So it's kind of working. I kind of wanted to see if you kind of have an approach how we can share those internally without going online yet, just to kind of get an idea of how this can help us. And so you kind of know how we're doing it right now. And so, so that's kind of my question. I don't know if you have other ideas or suggestions. One question, is like, can you get to those visuals or dashboards, through a different way without Power BI, maybe HTML, web link or something without publishing?
Good question. So let me quickly ask, so you're concerned about putting your data in the cloud is security. Is that the concern, or is that something else going on?
We're just not, we haven't gone to that point where we kind of need to, meaning I've known of the cloud for a long time. It's just we're trying to develop kind of the processes, and we're kind of just testing it internally to see if we're going to move in this direction. Does that make sense? Because we're also taking we're taking a profile. We're also so that's the question.
Okay, all right, got it. So you want to share internally, you feel like you're kind of running a pilot, and I just want to test things out, and you've been sharing PBIX around. So of course, you're already on to something right there. So so if you don't publish it to powerbi.com, you can just pass around the PBIX file, and that is kind of living in the old world, if I may say that, which is, same as the XLSX file when people were building things in this. Then, that was the thing. You would put it on, you would email it. That was the worst one. Or you could put it on a network file share, or you can put it up on a kind of an intranet site or a SharePoint site, a common location, and that's how everybody would consume it. And so you can continue to do that. You can continue to just put the PBIX file on a shared location, and that way one person is typically responsible for refreshing it. Now there are ways to set up an automatic refresh as well. If you're still in the testing mode, I wouldn't worry too much about that. That can come later. Just know that that's there. for PBIX, you can set up automatic refresh. So one person refreshes it, and then since it's in a shared location, everybody just gets to consume it. So that can work, but of course, I would say if you're looking to share, the easiest path is PowerBI.com, and especially if you don't have kind of security concerns. That's the biggest one we hear. Of course, Doug was asking about that earlier. So if that's not the case, then there are options that you can share the PBIX file internally, but I think those are harder. Those even may be much more costly. So so that may involve you getting a license of SQL Server so you can run SQL Server reporting services. So yeah, so the same things that I talked to Doug about hosting things on site. So the options are you set up a SSRS CTP, the latest one, that has the ability to host your PBIX files on that on-prem server. Another is...
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, actually, do you see, let me see if I can copy that. Oh, copy, oh gosh. So that one is this guy. So yeah, if you, so technical preview, so it's in technical preview, it's not kind of released yet, not official, but that's a screenshot they put in and doesn't say much. But really what they're showing here is that your report has been deployed to an on-premises server, SQL Server reporting services. Now, I'm not sure about this one, but I do know for SSAS, you have to buy either a SQL Server Enterprise license or a Business Intelligence license. And I was working with a small business, and they came back and they told me that the cost was, well, prohibitive for them. I should have asked them the exact number. I don't know. And compared to that, PowerBI.com, well, PowerBI.com, they could run it on free. And even if you need to go pro, it's $10 per user per month, which then you have to judge how many users you have. If you have 100, that 100 times 10 is $1,000 per month. But in a lot of cases, PowerBI.com, even if you go pro, is cheaper, and free is of course free. Can't beat that. So really, for sharing, PowerBI.com is the easier option. Okay. And I would say, you're in a test mode. I get it, totally get it. Just go ahead. It's free. Just go to PowerBI.com, sign up for an account. Just put and put the publisher PBIX up there, and just share it with one person. Just try it. Just see how that works. And of course, publishing is so easy. You can, if you have your Power BI desktop file, the publish button is kind of right there. That's all you have to do. And so yeah, just go ahead and try it. That would be my best recommendation.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay, good stuff. Good questions, folks. So let me see. I can get Rigo. And who do we have? 20 minutes, 30 minutes. All right, next one up is Sandro. All right. Hey, Sandro, how are you doing? Tell us about yourself. Tell us where you're calling in from.
Hey, how are you? Thank you very much. This is the first time that I'm participating. I appreciate your help on this. My name is Sandro. I'm calling from Chicago. I work in a food distribution company.
Okay.
So basically, I have a very specific question. I hope you can help me because I have been stuck for the last 2 days on that.
Okay.
Basically, I create and I send you an email on that. I don't know if you have a chance to see it. Basically, I need to organize a specific graphic based on the week number and the year. But the problem is that when I have information from 2 different years, 2016 and 2017.
Yeah.
So what happened is when I started sorting the data, I got, for example, the last week for December, 2016 51, 2016 52. I got 2016 53, which is a mix between the last week of 16 and the first week of 17.
Yeah.
And when I get the week 2017 10, it is not sorted right because it goes just next to the Power BI is not recognizing the 0 at the end, I think. I was hoping you can give me some clues on that, on how to resolve this.
Yeah, let's give that a shot. Oh gosh, so this is terrible. So my GoToWebinar interface is telling me that you're not able to see my screen. Are you kind of online or just on the phone? Can you see what
No,
I'm
yeah,
sharing on this?
I'm just on the phone. Sorry,
Okay.
I have a problem
Okay.
with my internet connection.
No worries. Well, you asked a question. So for some of this, it might be hard to follow if you're just on the phone, but this is being recorded. It's going to be published and shared later on, so you can go back and watch the recording. So let's see
Absolutely,
if I
absolutely.
can try one of these. And I think I had the week number in one of the models that I was playing with. Let's just make sure.
If I could have
Perfect.
data for just one
Yeah.
year, it wouldn't be a problem.
Uh, I know. Why don't we do that? Why don't you go back to your customer and say, guys, just 1 year of data. Isn't that fun? Oh man, seriously. I work with so many clients where if they just didn't ask for this one thing, everything would be so easy. But like, no, we want this and we want that. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. But the good thing is, man, we got Power BI on our side. So hey, this is fun. This is gonna get a little bit hairy. So I'm gonna talk you through since you're on your phone. So first thing
Yeah, absolutely.
is I'm gonna assume that you have a calendar table which has a contiguous set of dates. If you don't,
Yes.
you absolutely need one. Really, I have never built a model so far which didn't have kind of a calendar or date table. It doesn't matter what you call it, it really has to have a list of contiguous dates. So what I have right
Oh,
here, yeah.
excuse me. What do you mean with calendar table?
Okay. So calendar table is a table which at least has one column in there, and that column is a date data type, and I'm showing this on my screen right now. So this one is a date data type. You can't see a date data type, and the dates are contiguous. That means there's no break. So obviously you have a start and a stop point. In my data set, I go from January 2014 to December 31, 2017, let's say, right? Big enough to encompass all your data, but there are no gaps. So some people do like, oh, we're not open on weekends. I'm going to pull that out. Oh, we don't do any business in December. I'm not going to have December on there. Or something silly like that. No, you can't do any of that. Contiguous dates. So that's your calendar or
Oh,
date table. Yeah.
okay. And so maybe that's the problem because I don't have the kind of table. What I was doing is I was
Mm-hmm.
using one of my columns that shows receiving dates, but
Yeah.
they are not contiguous.
Um, yeah, gosh, calendar table is a given for me. I mean, sometimes that's the first table I create. I don't even care about pulling the other data. So calendar table is needed, but in your scenario, you need a little bit more. So I'm just gonna kind of talk through it since you can't see the screen. So I have my calendar table, and it needs that one
Okay.
column, and that's the only column that DAX care about. So really, calendar table, one of the key reasons to have it is you can use time intelligence functions. You can do year-over-year comparisons using, date add or same period last year. So again, it's going to be recorded. So I realize that some of it may be like overwhelming for you. Like, oh, I didn't have a calendar table. What's Abby talking about? You can go back and watch it again. But I'm just telling you. So calendar table, that's one big reason to have it. And then, of course, what I like to do is I throw in all the different attributes of a date in there. So the table I'm showing right now, it has the year, quarter, it has a month name like January, all of that. It has fiscal year, which we use at Microsoft, which starts in July. It has weekday num, and for your purposes, I have the week number as a contiguous number. So my first, if I start in January 1, I have week 0, and then January 5th or 6th, it becomes week 1 and week 2 and week 3, and it keeps going, right? So a contiguous
Okay.
number. And what I'm going to do next is what I imagine you have, which is a label. Now that label, you don't want to show the week number. Like week number 24 would make no sense to the customer. So what I'm going to add here is kind of a week label. Let's see if I can do it right. And I'm going to pick my week start. And I think it's text format. Let me double check. So I'm just adding a custom formula. So I'll get the label up, and then we'll go dive into that.
So Can I ask you a question in the meantime?
Yeah.
How I'm going to create a relationship between the calendar table and the rest of my data? The other tables that I already have.
Yeah, so you have in one of the tables, I think you mentioned the reporting date, or whatever date column, that's where the related calendar table would apply. So if you have a date column in your data set, that's what you would use to connect to it.
Oh, okay. But the question is, for example, I work in a food distribution company, so I'm checking on orders received in a specific date. So what happens if I have several orders that were received in the same day? That's not going to create a problem with the relationship, because there will be a one-to-many relationship. That would be okay?
Yeah, that's perfectly okay. In fact, that's typically how relationships work. On the one side, the entity is unique. Yeah.
Oh,
so
you're right.
Yeah, so that one is desktop format. I can't. Maybe. Okay, let's do it differently. So I can't figure out the function, but we're gonna say add column date, and I'm gonna pick the year of this. I'm gonna pick the day. And I'm going to pick the month. Okay, now it's going to be much easier. This number is okay. Great. So so I'm almost there. Text out from, and really to cut to the chase, what you really need is, by default, it sorts it alphabetically. In fact. So let's go back. So so I have my week column ready, and I intentionally put some text in there. So week of, and then I say January 12, 2014. But it doesn't matter what your label is. So now I have a week label for each week. But more importantly, I also have a number, a week num. So when it says week of 12/29/2013, the week number is 0. When it says, the label says week of January 5, 2014, then it says 1. And then it keeps going, right? The number grows each time I move on to the next label. And then when you bring it in, and again, it's all recorded, so you can go back to that. When you bring it in, all you have to do is go to your calendar table, pick your label column, and by default, it's going to sort kind of alphabetically, but in the modeling tab, there is this sort by column, and that you can use to say, no, sorted, not the default alphabetical order, but sorted by something else, sorted by week num. And once you do that, then your labels are going to show up correctly. So let's see that in action.
So you basically, you are sorting one column based on another column, isn't it? You are using that function that Power BI has.
Exactly. Yep. So let's try week label. And yep, it's not alphabetical, it's chronological, right? So it's growing in order of time. So we go from, let's make it bigger. So yeah, so we start on the oldest week we have and go to the newest week. Doesn't care about year, so yeah, it definitely works across boundaries. So all right, so that's your answer. And what I'll say here is that sort by column is a really cool feature. And the first use that almost anybody where they apply it for is to sort the month names. That's the first thing. If you build a calendar table, if you have January, and all that stuff, guess what's the default first month if you don't fix it? It's April. That's alphabetically the first one. So that's the first thing you do. You go to month and you say sort by column, month number. But sort by column can be actually used for some really cool stuff. And one of the things that I use, just to throw out an example, is you can have a list of your customer names, right? And let's say you're putting them in a slicer or something like that. Now, slicer doesn't really let you change the sorting. I mean, you can sort descending, but it's going to be, let's try full name. Right? It's going to be alphabetical. And so what I've done for at least one case where I was working with a sales team is we changed the order. We sorted the customer name based on, the biggest customer, which of course was based on the sales. So now the slicer, instead of having 100 items alphabetical, it showed like the top customers near the top, and it made it easier to focus on, easier to select them. So yeah, sort by column goes beyond just fixing your date and month and week num and week label formatting. So terrific, good question. Let's see, we got one person there. All right, so David, hi there. Tell us about yourself. What's on your mind?
Sure. Hi, Avi. It's David again from the beginning of the call.
Yeah. Sorry, actually, we moved you to the back of the line, but yeah, thanks for being patient.
No, that's okay. That was when you were asking if people could hear you, and I could hear you. I didn't have a question at that time, and this is my first Q&A session, so thanks for hosting this. Really excited. 20-year plus finance professional, 1 year minus Power BI, Power Pivot user, so new to this.
All right.
It's
How
really
exciting.
Cool
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. So, I think Microsoft introduced some forecasting tools with some of their visuals back in September, but I didn't have a need for them back then, but I'm interested in getting started in that area now, and looking in Power BI and at the visuals, and I don't see any forecasting options. I do see some, where you can do some calculations around average, mean, etc. But what would you recommend as far as, if there's nothing directly in Power BI, then, what's your recommendation for someone starting? Are there any resources out there on the web that you think I should hit for just getting started with forecasting?
Yeah, good question. And yeah, so I've worked long with finance teams. Yeah, I think it's one of the best homes for these new tools because there's so much they can do, and yeah, it can help their lives in a big way. So I'm glad you've discovered these. So forecasting is available in Power BI. Let me see if I have an example. And it's kind of hidden away. It's I wish it wasn't quite like that. But so why is my display like this? So in here, if you select any visual, it's typically found under this tab. I think it's called Analytics. Let's see. Yeah, Analytics. But a lot of time it's visual specific. So you have to have the right visual for that to work. Let me see. I think line chart is one which does it. Okay, let's just do a line chart. And it's a little tricky. So line chart, and if I go in here, you have a whole bunch of options. Constant line, minimum, maximum, average line, I can add that. But still no forecasting. And you can kind of Google it, but one rule for that is the axis needs to be contiguous. So I have month names. It's not contiguous. So let's try maybe by order date. So I'll show you a few options, and then we'll kind of come back and talk about it. So instead of month, which is kind of interval, it's not contiguous, I put in dates there. And And now if I go back to analytics, woo, voila, there's a forecast line. And you can add it, and it has some basic settings in here. So let's see. That's really small. Let's see. Go back to forecast. And I'm going to say add, I don't know, 100 points. Does that work? Apply. Yeah. Okay. That's a little better. Yeah, I'm kind of offended that it doesn't think my business is going to keep growing, even though I had this uptick here. But it flattens it out. So it does this, it's doing this cyclical thing. Actually, let's maybe zoom into 1 year. Let's see how that does. So I wondered about this, that if I change, if I'm only looking at, come on, a specific data set, does it only use that? Let's find out. Huh, yeah, it's weird. So yeah, it does change it. So it only has 1 year of data right now to work with, so it doesn't understand cycle yet. But as soon as I add 1 more year, or at least 3, now it understands that, oh, it's cyclical. It's going up and down, so it did that. So it's kind of limited, and frankly, in my case, doesn't seem like giving me the answer I want. So that's the built-in option here. And you can do the confidence interval, right? So you can say 80% confidence, and that's the gray lines around that, and so forth. So that's one option. Another option, of course, if your forecasting method is somewhat simplistic, it's just, yeah, this is our growth rate and apply that, then you can define that using your measures, and I've done that. So, right now sales is saying sum of sales amount, and you can say define sales forecast is, take the prior year sales and then multiply it by whatever, something like that. So if you have like a simple enough formula, you can define that as a measure and just drop that on the graph. So where sales end, sales forecast is going to pick up. That's one option, and the other option, of course, is kind of the heavy hitter ones, which we talked about. Gosh, I forget who I was talking about with, but Pamela, I think was it? Yeah, or somebody else asked about. So that one is if you leverage either R or you leverage Azure ML, and if you really get into it, maybe you can get help. I certainly don't know R, don't know the first letter of it. Maybe I just know the first letter of it, but I've heard great things about it. It's kind of the de facto language that analysts use, and it's pretty powerful in terms of forecasting and such. So you have the inbuilt one, you have one you can build your own in Power BI using a measure, and the third option would be kind of the heavy-hitting one, which is using R or Azure ML.
Okay. Thank you. I think you kind of reiterated what I was expecting there, and certainly the hang-up for me then was exactly as you noted. I was using a date format that was the 3-letter format by month, and I guess that's why it wasn't switching over to the forecast options under the visual. But yeah, I mean, I heard it's really sort of in the early phases around development within Power BI, within the visuals as they exist. And I think that was the other thing is, someone had recommended to me RScript. And again, if you had any specific sources that you recommended for just getting started, but if you don't, that's okay. I certainly understand.
All right, terrific. All right, thank you. Thanks for the question. And the oddest thing is that the forecasting feature was there the first time around, what's called, well, now referred to as Power BI .com V1. And then they just did an overhaul V2, and forecasting was dropped, and now it's back. But I think the forecasting in V1 was a lot more fully featured. I remember you could kind of drag the forecast out right here, and the best part was, and it may be possible to do here, I just don't know how, was you could forecast kind of back on your data, and that would give you a test of how accurate the model was. So in here, it would forecast kind of back somewhere here, and you could see that, oh yeah, my forecast is way off, so something is going wrong, or yeah, it's bang on, so it's working right. All right, so that's pretty cool. let's see what else we have. All right, Scott, welcome to the call, and tell us about yourself. Tell us what you have in your mind. Gosh, have you talked already? Scott? Maybe. All right, Scott,
yeah.
Okay,
there was a question around the use of Power BI for accounting software.
Okay.
And I've heard about and seen a few things on the web about some out-of-the-box content packs for accounting software, Great Plains Dynamics, for example. And I was just curious if you've worked with that before.
Out-of-the-box content packs, is it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think what's the one, so I'll show you a few things. So if you were to go to PowerBI.com and say get data, there's this thing called services, and that one, I don't know if it has any dynamics one. It's got lots of cool dynamic stuff. I've used MailChimp and such, so the way these work is that you connect to it, you give it your credentials, and then you get like a full-fledged dashboard. Now, the challenge that I had with that option was that I couldn't manipulate it. I got the dashboard, but really I'm the author on this this spectrum. I like delving here. I like messing with the query. Oops, I don't know what I launched. And defining new measures, and it was kind of a dead end. I mean, you couldn't do that. You couldn't define your queries, change your queries, define your measures. So I wasn't a big fan of that. Now, I think that may have slightly changed, because separate to this, what they did was they allowed you to download maybe a PBIX file for that. I'm not really sure, but I haven't played with that. So that is one option. You can tool around, see how that works. The other option that is available are these solution templates. So if you go there, there might be something there which gives you just so Dynamics 365 is there. Yeah, I don't have that many, but I expect that they would build it out. And I like these because this would give me a full-fledged Power BI desktop file, but pre-configured. I can just point it to my own server, and boom, it's going to have all the queries, it's going to have all the tables, and it's going to have some kind of report and dashboard, which I can then totally tool around with. So those are the two I know. Now, I think you're the second person who has asked about this or something similar over the past few calls and used the word content pack. And maybe I'm missing something. Maybe Microsoft is in some places calls these content packs, because the way I think of content pack is a way to share data within, a way to share your Power BI data set, reports, oops, let's go back to orange, data set, reports, and dashboards within your organization. So I'm at Microsoft and I built something, and then I'm going to say, yep, create this content pack, throw all this in, all this cool stuff, and I want to share it with my entire organization, and then somebody else can use it too. So that's how I think of content pack. But what you're asking about does exist in kind of two forms. One is you can try get data services, see if that's there. Another is you can go to Power BI Desktop and click on Solution Templates. So give that a try, see if you find something. If not, gosh, yeah, then either you're building it from scratch for yourself or hiring somebody who has possibly done that for some other customer. Does that help?
It does, thanks. Okay,
perfect. Great. So I think the template is a brilliant option, which, so I've been doing consulting for the past 2 years. Now I'm more focused on training. But in my consulting career, I didn't use it enough, because a lot of times we're working with finance organizations, they have the same needs. And if you had just put in a little more effort, we could have built something, and then saving it as a template is easy. So solution templates is kind of the official ones, right? So these are officially sanctioned ones, but anybody can create templates. All you have to do is just do file save as, and you have it right here, Power BI template. And you can save it as that, and I can hand it off to you. So if I had built, let me see what you were asking about, Great Plains Dynamics solution, I could save it as a template and just hand it to you. Say, hey, here you go, here's what I have. So if you find somebody who's done that, that could be a quick route. I will say there's a team I'm working with right now, and I'm learning about dynamics, and the first thing I learned was there are tons of different versions, and the one that my client has is called Dynamics SL. So I do have a solution built for that, not for this perhaps. All right, folks, gosh, we're on the hour. I don't see any raised hands, but I'll do kind of one last call. And hey, if there's something on your mind, and while I'm waiting, I'm going to go back, and I think I missed some cool comments that came in. Let's see. Oh yeah, so Scott had a comment about would row-level security address sharing limits. I don't quite understand that because I think I've lost the context around that. Row-level securities. So sharing limits. Oh, okay. I think I get it. So yeah, we were talking about, I think this was around what Pamela was asking, that, hey, if I share, what do they have access to and what do they not have access to? And then I was like, oh, you have to hide the Q&A. But another scenario is that I want to share the same model freely with, let's say, the whole organization, but I want to restrict it based on roles. So if I go in AdventureWorks and there's a manager who's in charge of bikes, I want them to only see the bikes data. And if there's a manager in charge of accessories, and you can think of all sorts of different scenarios. Salespeople who are assigned to North America only see the North America data. So yeah, so the row-level security is really, really cool way to do it. The only caution that I would throw out there is that row-level security is a pro feature. And the way it works right now, if the author goes pro, if you create a report which uses a pro level feature, then all of the users of the report have to have a pro license as well. So it's possible that you have a report which is being used by 100 users, and suddenly you say, you know what, I'm going to add row level security on it. Guess what? You now just went from free to paying $10 for those 100 users. That's $1,000 a month. So it's pretty cool. But if you're already pro or don't worry about that, you maybe have a small group of users who are all pro, then yeah, row-level security is pretty cool. All right, great. So yep, no raised hands. So all right, folks, I'll sign off, and hey, I'll see you hopefully next Friday.